Every time I turn on a Resident Evil game, I feel something different than I do when playing other survival horror games. Comfort. By definition, the horror genre is meant to evoke a sense of fear, tension, dread, uncertainty. When playing a video game, these feelings could even be amplified due to the fact that the player is the one in control. The player has to make the choice to go through that door, crawl into that hole, or take part in whatever other uncomfortable situation is required to progress. The best horror games are often designed in such a way that if you're playing your cards right, you have just enough of what you need to get by. Whether that's limited ammo, limited health, your defenses are barely just strong enough. At least on a first playthrough, you may oftentimes feel the nerves of the game's character, just like you're scraping by. This recently raised a pretty strange question in my head. Why does gaming's most iconic survival horror franchise feel so familiar to come back to? Why, despite being surrounded by terror, despite being in places that make me uncomfortable, does the game put a smile on my face? Let's talk about that. Now, I haven't played every Resident Evil game ever made, but I've played many of them, both new and old. I have a strong understanding of how the games work and how they're structured. Resident Evil has rules. It may feel chaotic at first, but in time the system becomes clear. There are inventory limits, locked doors, puzzles to solve, enemies to take down, and scarce resources. Once you've played one of the mainline games, you start to get it. You quickly begin to understand that the worlds are dangerous, but it's danger with structure. There's a logic to the game, and that fear becomes something you learn how to navigate. The first time you play a Resident Evil game, everything feels overwhelming. Every hallway feels dangerous, every new enemy feels like a threat you may not survive, and every new environment feels confusing. But as you press on, this all changes. You learn enemy behaviors, you learn when it's best to keep fighting or when to retreat to conserve ammo. You start unlocking shortcuts and discovering new pathways. These spaces and the creatures that inhabit them slowly but surely become familiar. They start looping back on themselves. What once felt like a giant puzzle becomes a place you understand. You feel yourself getting more comfortable as you keep progressing. Perhaps this is only a feeling you develop after playing a number of them, but anytime I play a survival horror game, Resident Evil or not, once I get my bearings, I can begin to walk around the area with confidence instead of fear. A feeling arc that many horror game protagonists also experience. They're fearful at the start, but by the end, they take on the main evil head on. When it comes to Resident Evil, what I'm trying to say is there's a level of predictability that evokes a sense of comfort. When it comes to art, whether it's movies, music, video games, or more, the word predictable may often come off as negative. Maybe not every title in the series has pulled it off flawlessly, but when it comes to Resident Evil, this series is seamlessly threading the needle when it comes to balancing comfort and unpredictability. It's always doing just enough to keep you smiling and wanting to keep going, while also leaving you with the feeling that maybe you're too scared to continue. When a video game makes you feel such an emotion, that's an achievement. Another iconic element of Resident Evil is the safe room. It's a sacred space that you can enter knowing nothing can attack you. This is often where you save, access the item box, and just get your bearings before going back out into the horror. The way Resident Evil handles safe rooms is perfect. They often have softer music and a sense of stillness to them. You can be running away from the biggest enemy, and then you enter a safe room and bang, the horror's on pause. The player is momentarily in control of an uncontrollable nightmare. You can take a deep breath, relax, reorganize your thoughts, manage your inventory, and strategize your next move. Another thing that invites comfort is familiarity. Now, this is something that maybe you would only feel if you've been a longtime fan of the series, but in addition to the recognizable game mechanics, seeing iconic Resident Evil characters return after an extended hiatus makes you feel right at home. In the case of Resident Evil Requiem, players step back into the shoes of Leon S. Kennedy. You know that you've been through this with Leon before. He is, by all accounts, a badass, and he will get you through this journey again. All the recent Resident Evil games have also done this to varying degrees, but once again, these characters are iconic. If you've played previous entries, you know they've been through the ringer. They're battle-tested, and they will get you through this again. Maybe on a goofier note, one thing Resident Evil is no stranger to is jumping the shark a bit at times. There are moments that, if you really sit there and overthink them, feel absolutely ridiculous, whether it's over-the-top action or ridiculous story beats. I don't want to dive too deep into examples because It's kind of what makes Resident Evil Resident Evil. It really is all part of the experience. The over-the-top campy horror stuff makes Resident Evil what it is. And most of the time, no matter how crazy it gets, it finds a way to stick the landing. This brings me to Resident Evil Requiem, the inspiration for this video. I don't want to sit here and regurgitate the popular talking points of this game. I'm sure you all know that it is fantastic and it perfectly balances the survival horror and action horror genres. But just in case you didn't know, it is fantastic, and it perfectly balances the survival horror and action horror genres. Part of why it has garnered the praise it has isn't simply because it's good, it's because it feels like coming home. Requiem, like all the best games in the series, respects the player's time by keeping the main story focused, maintaining good pacing, and not overwhelming players with countless mechanics, which also adds to the comfortability I talked about earlier. If it's come under scrutiny for anything, it's been complaints about its pacing, but personally I feel that, maybe aside from a part or two, it sticks the landing pretty well. After all, strong pacing is a major reason why this series works. The games are designed to be played more than once, often offering new challenges, costumes, weapons, and more for additional playthroughs. If it weren't paced well, you would never want to slog through it again and again, yet so many players keep doing it. Requiem's dual protagonist setup gives you a character in Grace who many can relate to. At the start of the game, she's just a normal person. She goes to work and is naturally terrified when she's thrown into a pretty uncomfortable situation. On the flip side, there's Leon. He's relatable for the opposite reasons. He's not an average Joe, but players have spent years with him over multiple decades. At this point, we've been through so much with him. It culminates in a roller coaster ride of comfort while also venturing into the unknown. It's hard to put into words, but especially on a first playthrough, I got the sense that I really hadn't experienced anything quite like it before. Requiem also follows the classic Resident Evil tradition of the wacky, over-the-top horror moments that are just as much fun as ever. But that isn't even my favorite part of the experience. I love the fact that it understands how to give you that sense of comfort while also feeling like something completely new. It understands that fear only works if players are given a chance to recover. Resident Evil doesn't try to scare the player constantly. It scares you in waves. You explore, you fight, you find relief in a safe room. Understanding this cycle is comforting, but without the predictability. You never know exactly what lies ahead. Familiar characters, enemies, and returns to iconic locations should make you feel right at home. And it does. But it's like you're at home, but you're not welcome there. There are new threats looming. There are story elements previously unexplored by the series. It is proof that the series is evolving without losing its identity. There was a time when the series definitely was losing its identity, but I can confidently say that most haven't felt that way for a number of years. This balance between change and familiarity is often not seen in franchises that have been running as long as Resident Evil has, but this is what keeps players coming back. Horror games are supposed to make you feel uncomfortable. They're designed to make us feel tense and uneasy. But Resident Evil carefully engineers comfort so the horror works. It scares you, then gives you a moment to breathe. It throws you into chaos, but hands you the tools to survive. Somewhere in that structure, somewhere between the monsters and the puzzles and the safe rooms, that terror changes into something else. It's not quite safety, it's comfort, even when it absolutely shouldn't.